Hey y'all, I'm Carrie, and this is Monstrous, where the stories are strange, the shadows run deep, and the tea is always a little dark. All right. Welcome back, y'all. Okay, I know you guys usually don't hear from me on a Friday because that's when this is coming out, but you're getting another bonus this month because I have a special guest with me, and this one is one you're not going to want to skip. Today, I'm joined by Kevin Hall, and I'm really glad to have you on with this one, Kevin.
Thank you for having me.
Not a problem. So glad you're here. So, like you said, on your show, we've been in a very unique position, the two of us. At the same time that you were doing your 12-part series, I was also digging into my long form single episode on Amy Bradley using pretty much all of the same source material. So, we've both been sitting with this case for a very long time at the exact same time. Now, for those of you that may not know who Kevin is, he is the host of the Midnight Mystery Archive podcast, and he is also the author of Echo 1953, which will be coming out soon, which we're going to talk about that. So, again, Kevin recently wrapped up his 12-part series this Friday. And since that episode will be coming out,
This coming Friday will be the last one.
yeah, so as you're hearing this, the last episode is out. So I wanted this conversation that we're having today to be less like a recap and more kind of like a reflection of what you and I both have learned after digging into it the way that we have. What the case looks like after we've both lived with it for months.
Sure. That sounds
So
great.
so Amy Bradley's disappearance has stayed with many people for decades, nearly 3 to be exact. There's the cruise ship setting, the unanswered questions, the family's long search for answers, and the way that the case continues to resurface. So, we're going to step back and talk about exactly that: what lingers, what shifted, and what still doesn't quite sit right. So, Kevin, one thing that stands out about this case is that it hasn't faded the same way that many others do. After all the time that you yourself spent with it, why do you think Amy's story still resonates so strongly nearly 3 decades later?
Well, I think there's a few reasons. First is her family. They have been consistent and vocal
Yes.
and active in so many different ways over 28 years. So I have shared on the podcast my first experience with Amy's case was Unsolved Mysteries in 1999, so a year after she disappeared. And they have consistently done shows and documentaries to keep her story top of mind for people. I think another big reason that probably doesn't get talked about a lot is her age, especially in the era of documentaries and podcasts. She is within that key demographic of
Mhm.
people who are consuming that media. So I think there's something there that draws people in too, because it's somebody that is similar age that sees it and says, "Oh my gosh, I remember 1998. I remember going on spring break. I remember this." And it just draws them in because it's very relatable just
Yeah.
by virtue of your age and some of the life experiences at the same time you might have had. So I think that's a big part of it. And for all its flaws, I think the Netflix show did an immense amount for keeping her name out there. I don't know that it did much else,
Right.
but it did keep her name out there. And you can't understate that.
No,
The reach
you
is
can't.
huge.
Yeah, it is because especially with, I think especially for people that are my age because as I mentioned when I came on your show, I was, about to be 4 when Amy went missing. So for people that are my age and my generation, I think maybe that's what resonates with us is that we've been living our lives longer than she got to.
Yeah, and I think too, because her parents have been so central in her
Yeah.
entire case, a lot of those people that are Amy's age are now parents.
Mhm.
And I think they can see her parents still in their 70s fighting and looking for answers and being able to relate to that on a very personal level because now
Right?
they're parents.
Yep. It's like what I couldn't imagine going through that if it happened to my child. Yep, I think that's a very big one also. And then what do you think that people are connecting with aside from being a parent? What is it that you think they're connecting with when they hear their story? Do you think it's the mystery, the her family search, or do you think it's something else completely?
Say it's a blend of both of those for sure, because one of the things that humans are just not wired for is not having an answer or not understanding something. So when you have a story of someone who disappears, whether it's a kid, whether it's an older adult, whether it's somebody who's 23 years old, that automatically trips your trigger because it's like, how does it happen? I got to know what happened to this person. But in addition to that, it's the fact that, again, I think her parents are just so likable.
Yeah.
And it's really hard not to see them and not think, well, gosh, I need to care about this. I
Yeah.
mean,
I
think
agree.
that's a big part of it. And then I think too, the other part is the cruise dynamic of it. So many of us have been on cruises, so you can relate to that. You can picture being in the lounge in the evening, everybody dancing and the music playing loud. Many of us have had that experience.
Mhm.
So I think that's a big reason why, it keeps us kind of connected to it. Is it's not relatable on the fact that she's missing. Like,
Right.
fortunately, not everybody has to experience that, but so many other elements are relatable.
Yeah, I would say that I would definitely agree with that. I think it's a mixture of a little bit of all of it. Is kind of makes it everybody I have to know.
Yeah, yeah, because we are just not wired to not know.
Now, after completing your full 12-part series, did anything shift for you personally in how you understood the case?
Boy, that's a tough question. I've been a pretty firm believer that she was gotten off the ship and trafficked. So that part of it has really just been bolstered. I feel that more strongly than I probably did, even though I was pretty firmly in that court before I
Mhm.
started. I I would say the one thing that I I don't want to say I had doubts about, but it's a reality in true crime is eyewitness accounts generally are not very reliable. And I had the opportunity to talk to David Carmichael, to Lori, to Judy. Bill Hefner was not interested, which I understand. And I always felt strongly about Judy's eyewitness account because she's recited that story multiple times over a 20-year period and it stays the same. And that
Right.
generally is an indicator of being honest and telling the truth.
Right, cuz the truth doesn't change no matter how much time passes.
Yeah. And Lori, I think, is extremely credible. I absolutely believe 100% that she and Crystal saw exactly what she told me they saw. I believe 100% that Victor McCullum treated them like dog shit and blew them off. And in David Carmichael's case, I actually would say beforehand, I was not skeptical of his account. It just seemed a little far fetched. And I think his account is a little bit stronger in my eyes now in having talked to him and heard it in detail,
Right.
which we hadn't heard from any of them at the level of detail that the interviews that I did with them show.
No, definitely not. It was just kind of, this is what they said, and that was it.
100% right. And it's like, use Netflix as an example. I think Lori was on Netflix, David was on Netflix, Judy was on Netflix. Now, granted, you've got a 3-hour runtime. You can't share a 10-minute story from each of them
Right.
in 120 or however many minutes it was, 180 minutes. So for me, it was really important to hear the full story because I knew there was more there than what anybody else outside of the family was aware of. And they just each come across as extremely credible. And I think all of their accounts are even more believable after having those conversations.
I would say that I have to agree with them being more credible and more believable hearing their full story all the way through on your show. Is that
Yep.
at first I was like, some of these kind of seem odd because you do have those people that come out and they just kind of want to be a part of it.
Yeah.
But after hearing it from them, it's I don't see there's any reason to not believe what they have to say.
The only thing that I will say is in Carmichael's eyewitness account, I'm not convinced that one of the handlers was yellow. Um, your mind can play tricks. I think it's more likely that it was somebody that looked like him than it was him because I don't see a scenario where the person responsible for shuttling her off of the ship or playing a role in that would also be a handler. I don't think network or trafficking networks tend to work that way. I think you have very defined roles within the network. And I think once you've served your purpose, you're done. So I think it was more likely that it was somebody who looked like him. That would be the only thing I would say I'm not convinced of.
And that would make sense, especially in the late 90s. There's a certain style, a certain look, so a lot of people did tend to look very similar, especially from a distance, if you're not, right up there face to face. Um,
Now,
so
would
it's
I be surprised if they verified that it was? No, I wouldn't be.
definitely not.
But I think that would be very unlikely.
Right.
That's just my opinion. Doesn't call into question what I think about his account. I think his account was 100% true. He saw what he
Yeah.
saw.
Yeah. And it could just be one of those cases where it's just a simple mistaken identity of that one person. That happens all the time. So, was there a moment that something really clicked for you that you thought people really needed to understand more than anything else?
Yeah, I think that it for me, there's really two things. The first one was when I talked to Michael Winkelman, who is the maritime attorney. I don't think people understand how complex jurisdiction is, especially in an environment like that. I mean, even now I see comments, well, we just need to go bring Douglas here. Well, it doesn't work that way. If it was that simple, somebody would have already done it. And we have to understand this story through that lens because it helps us to understand why we're sitting here 28 years later.
Yeah.
So that part of it I thought was really interesting. And I learned a lot from that. And I know from a lot of the people after I released that conversation, they shared with me, like, wow, I didn't really know how complex it really was. So I think that was extremely valuable. And I think the other thing too is when I talked to Tom, her boyfriend, I haven't said this on the podcast, but my takeaway from Tom is that I don't know the nature of their relationship. At the end of the day, I wasn't there. I didn't see it.
Right.
I didn't observe it. But I think he's never gotten over that experience.
Not sure if that's something that you ever truly can be able to get
Yeah,
over.
no, but I mean, it felt different than just, wow, boy, that's a big thing that happened in my life. I think it's something that really still strikes him very deep.
So sad.
Yeah, and not in a way that he comes off as depressed or
Right.
anything like that. It's just in my conversation with him, both on and not recording, I could just sense he genuinely cared deeply for her.
It
And I
really just
and,
affects him still to this
and
day.
I yes, exactly right. Um and I think that was the other thing that I took away from it too, because going back to Netflix, they try to paint a portrait that she was just some lovesick lesbian in a love triangle, right? I
Yep.
mean, that's the angle they played. They interviewed Tom for 5 hours.
Yeah.
Not only
Didn't
did they
use
not
him
show him, they didn't even
at
mention
all.
his name.
Nope.
And he was the one that was with her the 4 months previous. The other two, Kat, they hadn't interacted in years. And then Molly, it had been, I think, a little bit over a year.
She wasn't even responding to Amy's attempts to rekindle their friendship, let
Correct.
alone being in a romantic relationship.
So
Yeah.
to me, not only was I very, sympathetic towards Tom after I talked to him because it struck me just how deeply this whole thing impacted him. I even felt more sympathy towards him because if anybody had a glimpse into her frame of mind in the months leading up to that cruise, it's him.
Right.
All due respect to those other girls, but Molly hasn't talked to her in a year. What the hell is she going to know?
Right.
Kat, what the hell is she going to know? It's even longer.
Right. I think their last interaction, from my understanding, was when Kat slapped her at a
It was
softball game.
yeah, I think it was a couple of years. Now I could be wrong on that, but I think it was multiple years.
It's just I don't understand why they didn't include him, and I think it's awful because that even though it was years and years after the fact that they did the documentary, I feel like not being included may have, I'm trying to think, because I don't wanna put words in his mouth, but I think if it was done to me, it would be, for me, why do I need to talk to anyone about it? You're not gonna listen to me.
Yeah, and I think yes, I think that's true. There was some stuff he shared with me off the record, and I think there is a lot to that. What you
It
just said.
just it kinda
I think
becomes a resentful.
yeah, I think there was probably an inclination of, well, why should I do this? But at the end of the day, I think he does it because he has so much respect for Ron and for Iva and for Brad.
Yep, and I it's he probably still to this day has care for Amy and wants to know what happened.
I believe 100% that's the truth.
I think the way that Netflix did it, it infuriates me.
And the other thing I would say about Tom too is, you meet people and you talk to people that you just know are genuinely nice people,
Right.
and Tom checks that box. He was just a really nice guy to talk to. It was a pleasant conversation, great personality. I mean, he's the type of person you could hang out with and, shoot the shit with. He's just a nice person.
I watched his interview with Nate Eaton. I know it's been a couple years since he did that, but I did watch it, and he that's how he came across to me. He just seems like someone who is nice, and he really cared for Amy and still cares for Amy. And this still matters to him years later, even though he's not her family. And so the way that Netflix handled his interview, or didn't handle his interviews, really, it infuriates me. Like,
Me too.
really infuriates me. uh, so moving on, because I could go on that tangent forever. Um, was there a moment in your research or your production of the show that there was something in this case that hit you in a way that you didn't expect for it
Hmm. Boy, that's a tough question. I got to really think about that because here's the thing: a lot of it hit me, even though I knew the story pretty well. I guess if I were to say one thing, when I talked to Jim Carrey, some of the insights he was able to give me about his trip and Earl's trip down to meet Herman Goylo, kind of the cat and mouse game that he played with them. That hit me because he's not a young guy anymore. He's older. He's got grandkids, and I'm talking about Herman.
Mhm.
And if I knew something or said I knew something, I I would probably reach a point in my life where I would say, I got to get this off of my chest. And I said to Jim I think on a phone call, I said, do you really think he knows something? Because to me, his attitude and the way he acted tells me he doesn't. He's seeking clout,
Right.
inserting himself in the story is what my gut tells me. And he's like, the only thing that I would tell you, and I think it was Ron had spoke to him on the phone years ago, and he heard in the background his wife saying, just tell him what you know, which makes me think he knows something. And for whatever reason, he's just not sharing it. That hit me because how do you live your life knowing that something really awful happened to somebody and not tell the people who might be able to help or tell her family?
Right, especially once you become a parent and a grandparent yourself.
Exactly.
How can you not reflect on that and say, "What if this happened to me?"
Yeah, if I were to pinpoint something, it would be that.
Yeah, I
That's
think
just it's unconscionable to me.
it really is. That was one of the things that really took me by surprise when I listened to that episode. I couldn't believe that someone could live that long and go on and have a whole life and you don't say anything. And my thing is why hasn't his wife said anything? What does she know that he knows?
Yeah, and another thing too is I sometimes wonder too, and this sounds really bad and maybe even borders on conspiratorial, but I don't mean it to be this way. One of two things happens when you have a couple that knows about something bad or has had something bad happen to them. They either splinter and break or they band closer together to protect each other.
Mhm.
And I feel like maybe that's what's happening with them. I would I don't know them, but I would go out on a limb and say at their ages, they've probably had their fill of each other. I think that
Right.
happens to us as we get older.
Yeah.
Our tolerance for, our spouses, foibles probably grows a little thin. I'm sure if you ask my wife, she would agree with that.
Yep. At some
And
point the shenanigans
y-
become
it's no
enough.
longer funny. It's
Right.
obnoxious at a point. And I do wonder if there's something like that playing that, they're just protecting themselves and each other at this point, and that's what keeps them bound, and
I
that's why
mean
she hasn't said anything.
it would make sense because at this point it kind of also becomes what does she know that if she says something then this is going to come out about her, whether it be related to Amy's case or not.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's kind of conspiratory, but at this point, who knows? It could be anything.
Yeah, and, actually, I'm happy I get to talk like this because when I do the podcast, I really do not like to get into the speculative side of it. So now I'm free to speculate.
Yep. Yep. I we don't do well, I can't say we don't speculate on regular episodes. We do. We do. When it's necessary. But this one, hey, this is what we're here to do today. To talk all about it, our thoughts, what we've learned, all of that. That's why we're here. Which leads me into so we've both spent a very long time on this case. When you've spent as long as you have on this one, especially one that does not have a clear ending, does it kind of start to feel like it's bigger than just the facts?
Yeah, I think at this point, I have accepted that this case will probably be a part of me now for a long time, if not forever, until there's some sort of a resolution. I don't think you can invest the amount of time and energy that I have and that I'm sure you're doing without feeling that way. You can't like it's like I am not going to get to Friday, June 19th, release that final episode and be done.
Right.
Like that is not possible. And I think it'll be something I'll carry with me until there's an answer. I don't and I think that's just human nature
Yeah.
because again, it's that yearning for an answer.
It's the unknown is what just pulls you in,
Yeah,
and
and when you've invested so much into it, you can't just flip a switch and be done.
it kind of becomes personal
It does. It becomes
at
very
that point.
personal, and I would even go so far as to say it's there's you have an emotional attachment to it.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't do as much as you and I both have done, and speak with Brad and Sandy and everyone, and hear what they've been through and the pain and everything else that you see and that you can hear without it's on a certain level for yourself becoming personal and you kind of developing an emotional attachment to it. It's just I feel like something would be wrong with you if
Yeah,
that
I think
happened.
you would have to be wired very differently for that to
Yeah.
not happen.
Yeah. There would be some checking on that needed to be happening. uh, so after finishing something this heavy, how do you step away, step back if you can at all, and just kind of take a breather?
So when I started this, it was 12 episodes. The reality is when I finish this, it'll be 13 regular episodes because 12 is in two parts. It'll be 8, 9 Witness Wednesdays, and then I do my regular mini episodes, but they're all on Amy.
Hmm.
My 12 episodes is really gonna become 30 plus pieces of media at the end of this. And there's so much time that goes into it as a solo operator. You know,
Yeah.
I research, I write, I edit, I record, I edit the audio, I mix the audio, I do social media. And, it's 20 hours a week and I don't get paid for it. Right.
Right.
So it's very draining. It's draining mentally, it's draining emotionally, it's draining, um, just physically too, I think. There's been multiple points along this project that I will have said to myself, like, excuse my language, but what the hell were you thinking trying to do this? And um, so going back to your question, what am I going to do? So I texted Iva and Brad and Sandy the other day. I said, I think I'm going to take a week off and just not do anything, podcast related. But then I've already got like a plan for the summer and the fall, and if I take a week off, it's gonna screw up how those things are going to finish from a time standpoint. So I'm debating, maybe next week, just plowing through my next case in 2 parts and getting it all ready so that I can release it on my normal cadence and then, you know, actually
All you
step
have to
back
do
a
is
little bit.
hit that publish button.
All I've gotta do is hit the publish button. Yep. But then, I'm in the process now. My brother and I are talking about doing a weekly podcast. that is, it's actually more sports focused, but it's got an element of true crime to it. And you'll check my socials in the next few weeks. You'll see stuff on that. But I'm in the process of starting to, do like the early production stuff with that and figure out the cadence we want to do it in. Make sure that I've got him tooled up right, so he's got the right gear, and there's a lot going into that. So it's not like I'm going to step away, but I probably will step away recording just for a little bit to take a breather.
Yeah, do some background work rather than right in front of the
Yes.
mic.
Yeah, because honestly, that's the hardest part. And you know this as well as
Oh,
anybody.
yeah.
Researching and writing is a huge time commitment. And then, the recording is probably the easiest part. But then you actually have to go and make sure that the recording sounds right, that you haven't screwed it up, that it's, you know, what you read and wrote is consistent with how it sounds, because I've had
Yeah,
multiple instances going through this series and some of the other cases I've done before where I have it on paper and it looks good, and then I record it and I'm like, this there's a continuity problem here, and then I'm having to go back and re-record it. So there's just a lot to it. So I mean, it'll be a well earned sort of break.
yeah, it definitely will 'cause, I like I said, I've been following your 12-part plus series. I've listened to every one, and I think they sound great. I love them. All the new things that I learned that I actually did not include in what will be coming from my episode. So everyone, you definitely will have to go listen to Kevin's because there are some things I don't include in mine. And like you said, there's so much that goes into this. My grandma does help me out because Mandy's out, but I do just like you do all the research, the writing, the editing, the socials, the emails. It's a lot, and it really does weigh on you, especially when you have your everyday normal life on top of it.
Yeah, because
Uh,
you're doing all this stuff, and at the end of the day, the most important thing about it is that you do these cases justice,
right?
and that's a heavy burden to carry.
It
You know,
really is, and it's a lot. And that's
it's
why
it's a
our
lot.
Amy episode hasn't come out yet
Yeah.
because as you know, it looked great. It was ready to go, and when we recorded it, it just did not sound right.
Yep, I've
And
been there.
so so it's a lot, and it like you said, it really can weigh on you. Which leads me into I know that you covered Amy in a smaller episode previously.
I did.
What made you come back and do a 12-part series?
So there's a few answers to this one. So I briefly touched on it. It was maybe a 15-minute episode. And it was right around the time the Netflix show came out. And again, I had known of the case for years and I was always intrigued by it. And, I always kind of kept my eyes on it, any new information, anything change, any updates. And so I'm like, I need to do this case. And to be totally candid, I did it because I knew people were searching for it. And you're trying to grow an audience. So
Right,
if you know people are looking for something, you're going to do it. And oh, by the way, I had an interest in it already. It wasn't like I just decided to do it for the sake of doing it.
right.
Um, and around the time I was doing some stuff on TikTok, which thank God I have stopped doing because it is an absolute cesspool. But I digress. When I was doing that, I was doing a lot of content on that, and Brad contacted me. And I started to interact with Brad and talk to him and get to know him a little bit. And I was up in Richmond for work, probably back in the beginning of December. I said, "Hey, let's grab dinner." And I had been thinking about it. I even kind of put the idea in and said, "What do you think if I did something like this?" And we sat down at dinner and he's like, "Yeah, I think it's a great idea if you want to do it." So I said, "All right, screw it, I'll do it." And that's really what happened.
The rest is history.
Yeah, it just kind of became it became more personal to me at that point because I got to know Brad a little bit and I really liked Brad. And I thought, you know, I saw a lot of the struggle he faced after the Netflix show. and I wanted to do something that could help kind of steer the ship on Amy's story back in the right direction.
Yeah, because Netflix really took it out in left field.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's for sure.
that's a good way to describe it.
uh, so I know we talked about it on your show, um, a little bit, but going a little bit deeper into it, and there's a couple of things that we're gonna go a little deeper in. Was there a theory or lead that you found more compelling, but ultimately chose not to emphasize in your coverage?
Hmm. Oh, a theory. Well, I'll tell you, from a theory standpoint, it's it was the jumping, like the intentional jumping.
Yeah, that makes no sense.
It doesn't, because in every case of suicide, there are indicators leading up to that person's decision. They are always there. That is, I would bet a small fraction of a percent of suicide cases are just spur of the moment decisions. So that is one I really never put much time or thought into because it's just so ridiculous. As far as like a piece of evidence, there's not really anything from an evidence standpoint that I didn't, de emphasize or ignored because I just didn't think it was important. I really tried to do my best to discuss things that are out there that are, pretty well known and really jump at them in more detail than they probably have been at any other point in any other format.
There really wasn't a whole lot of evidence to begin with,
Well,
so it's
and yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's hard to discount any of it anyway.
Well, right, because there's hardly anything there. Royal
Ugh.
Caribbean did their due diligence, I suppose they would say, to do as little as possible in the immediate moments after they found out. By the time, even if the FBI went in with good intentions, which I don't believe that they did, because I think Victor McCullum's a piece of shit, and I think Aaron Sheridan just went along for the ride. Even if they had gone in with good intentions, after 48 hours, anything of any evidentiary value is gone.
Right, and the room had already been cleaned by that point, so what
Yep,
was left?
exactly, exactly.
They screwed it up from the very beginning.
Yep. They and I believe it's because it wasn't a case that to them was sexy.
Right.
It wasn't gonna get them any points. It wasn't gonna move them up the totem pole at the FBI. And frankly, I think they went in with the attitude, "Oh, she probably just fell." And
Yep.
that's how they handled it.
Yep, I fully believe, and I don't mean to laugh or, like, it's just so absurd to me, like, just the thought process.
There
I
was no
fully
thought process.
Right, I fully believe that they went in thinking they had a pre-deceived notion of what happened the moment they stepped on that ship. So, it's just the absurdity that both agencies, the ship and the FBI, failed tremendously. It's just like, how? I just it's baffling.
Yeah, I mean, and it's the biggest contributing factor to why you and I are even having this conversation,
Fully
because
agree.
here's the reality. We've talked about it. The family's really, really nice.
Yeah.
And I'm very happy that I've got to get to know them. But do you know something? I wish I'd never met them because the only reason I met them was because of what happened and the fact that the people that were supposed to help them didn't do jack shit.
Yep, they're supposed to be the ones to come in and save the day. Like I said before, they're supposed to come in and save the day. They're the knights in shining armor when no one else can do anything,
Their lives would be so
and they
much
didn't do
better
anything.
if we never have had to meet.
Yep, and it's an awful reality that you or I would have never met any of them had one of those 2 agencies
Done something.
Exactly. Yep. It's just it's one of those things that it infuriates you and it makes you even more mad because you know there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, yeah. I know, I know.
So, stepping back a little bit, that leads me into my next thing. What do you think that this case, so Amy's case, says about how missing person investigations unfold, especially in places like cruise ships?
So missing persons cases in general are just like any other crime. The first 48 hours is the most important window of time. It's when memories are freshest and people can recount in greater detail what they saw or what they heard. Then there's the component of actual physical evidence that is easier to find, identify, and maintain. And this case is a victim of having lost that 48 hours completely. I mean, forget what Royal Caribbean's intentions were, forget what the FBI's preconceived notions were coming in. They lost those 48 hours. They could have had the intentions of an angel. Without those 48 hours, they could have done nothing. So, I think that is probably the first thing. And then when it comes to cruise ships, I go back to the conversation I had with Winkleman. Prior to 2010, rape, murder, theft, assault, uh, any crime you can think of, a cruise line was not required to report it to anybody, not even the flag country. They were not required to report anything. I mean, think about that in context. Put Jeffrey Dahmer on a ship with a bunch of guys before 2010. He could have done whatever he wanted. And
Yeah,
guess what? If he had done what he did on a cruise ship,
he'd have got away with it.
he'd have gotten away with it. Like that should make people's head explode. I mean, like, how is this even possible? And that's where the whole jurisdictional thing comes in too. It's like, one, how is it possible? But two, how can they, Royal Caribbean flying a Norwegian flag in 1998, not be required to report crimes on their ship to Norway?
Right.
They're required to follow their employment laws,
So they should have to follow their
but there's no
criminal law as
mandatory
well.
reporting? Are you kidding me? So, think about this. Before 2010, can you even imagine? Can you even comprehend the number of crimes that happened on a cruise ship and nobody said boo?
I think it's one of those that I don't think anybody can come up with a number.
I don't think anybody even has the slightest idea.
No,
And I
especially
guarantee
if
you,
you knew that that's how it was. You went on this cruise and you intentionally did something because you knew you were gonna get away with it.
yep, yep. And I have to imagine that there were people with ill intent who went on cruises because they knew they could get away with it. I mean, that's the part that absolutely blows my mind. So, the Cruise Vessel Safety and Security Act has done a lot to
Mhm.
require cruise ships to do more, report these things, but there is still a very wide gap between where it is today
And where it should be.
and where it should be, right? So I'll tell you what I think. The fact that an American company, Royal Caribbean, can fly a foreign flag of convenience and follow some other country's law, excuse my language, is effed.
It is. They
Name me another company that can do the exact same thing. Not one. I work for American companies, and let me tell you something. We're not going to get the opportunity if we do something to say, oh, we're going to follow Uruguay's laws. No, that's not how it works. To me, the onus is on the federal government because these are companies operating internationally. They really don't fall under a state law, in my opinion,
Right.
because of that. This is on the federal government. They're allowing this shit to happen, and they're probably getting paid to do it. I mean, let's call it what it is. There's
Right.
not a person in DC that isn't having their pockets lined by some special interest, be it a cruise line, be it a defense contractor, be it whomever you want to come up with. And
Somebody's getting
until
paid somewhere.
and until somebody there has the gumption and the guts to stand up and say this is bullshit, it won't change. And
There's
it's infuriating to me.
it is. There are so many things that I have learned and realized just by covering and digging into Amy's case the way that I have, and then listening to your show and what you have learned as well. There's so many things that it's just, why is this happening? You, as a federal government, that you are sworn to protect and serve us, how are you letting this happen? Royal Caribbean, they should not be flying a flag of convenience.
No, if you're an American company, you fly an American flag and you follow American law. End of
Right.
story.
Yep. And somehow they're getting away with flying a Norwegian flag.
In 1998, I don't think any of them, I would be shocked if any of them fly a Norwegian flag anymore. They're probably flying Eritrea or some, small African country
Mhm.
where there's no rules.
Right.
They
Because
can
then
pay
they
they
get to
can
do
pay their
whatever they want.
employees pennies on the dollar. They can work them 20 hours a day. They can treat them like dog shit, not give them any benefits. I guarantee you that's what's happening with most of
Yep.
these ships today.
And really that's why they do it. They don't, I personally, in my opinion, I don't think they do it to get around, criminal laws. I I fully believe they do it to get around benefits, paying their employees what they deserve, you know, giving them paid time off and FMLA, maternity leave, all these things that when you are here as an employee in America, companies have to follow.
Yeah.
If they're flying
I
another
do think
flag,
they
they
do it
don't.
for criminal reasons too. I absolutely do think because I think holding them accountable for their failures is a lot harder to do when they're following those laws.
That's very true. That is very true because they're, in my opinion, they are culpable in what happened after Amy disappeared. They are culpable as well. I'm not gonna lie, part of me believes that there are some employees that are a lot more culpable than just after the fact, but
I think there are people that were employees on that ship at that time that know exactly what happened.
yeah, I think there are several. Uh, Let me see, we got off track, so I lost I lost my place on my list here.
I went off on a tangent, so that
Hey,
probably
that's
didn't help.
okay. I do it all the time, don't worry. One thing just triggers another and it just comes out. So if this same type of disappearance, so the way that Amy disappeared, if it had happened on land, do you think it would have do you think it would have played out differently than it did on the ship?
To a point, if let's say if we're if we're coming at it from the standpoint of let's say she wasn't on the ship, but she was physically on the island when this happened. I think it probably would have looked a little bit different because I think it would have forced the Curaçaoan authorities to take a more active role. I That would have eliminated the 48-hour delay of the FBI. So I think the potential to preserve evidence and get eyewitness statements is higher. Do I think that necessarily means it gets solved? No, because I don't know that, and this isn't a negative, I just don't know that a small country like that has a ton of experience investigating a missing international person.
Right? They
I don't think it would have
most
been
likely don't have what we have.
correct. Tom actually makes made the point when I interviewed him about like the Coast Guard. And he's like, if you had seen what was their Coast Guard, you would have thought, I mean, they were basically on dinghies, right? But it is what it is. You know, it's a small
Right.
Caribbean country. So it's not necessarily a negative towards them. I just don't know that they would have had the capabilities to do it. The one thing that would have changed is the preservation of evidence and the opportunity to get good, detailed eyewitness accounts close to the time it happened when it's more likely to be accurate.
I would have to say that I agree. I think that the likelihood of it being solved, I don't think that would have changed. But I think potentially the evidence and maybe figuring out which direction she went, having more of a lead of where to go, I think that might have changed. But everything else is kind of it's like you said, they're a small country. They don't have the resources that we have, unfortunately. So that leads me to, do you think that Amy's case exposes gaps in how missing people are searched for and then talked about publicly?
That's a really hard one to answer because it's just different, right? I'll give you an example. I'm going to be on another podcast talking about the case of Laureen Ron, who's a 14, I think 14, 15-year-old girl disappeared from Vermont, New Hampshire, one of those two states in 1980. And I covered her case a while ago, and they've been doing a lot of work on it, and I think are making really good progress on maybe finding an answer. So, Amy's case is just so vastly different from a standard missing person case because of the circumstance. So it's really hard for me to look at her case and answer that because it's so different and so unique. I don't know that I can answer that one. It's a really hard one.
So let me compare it to, because you and I had talked about John Bonet. So let me
Mm,
compare it to that one. John Bonet was covered widely the second she went missing. Everyone knows her name, everyone knows her face. And then on the flip side of it, there are so many people who didn't know Amy or her case until after Netflix.
yeah.
Do you
Well,
think there's some kind of, is it because Amy was on a ship? Or is it because, in your opinion, do you think it's because she was a grown woman where John Bonet was a child?
yeah, that's exactly where I was going to go. I think if there's one thing that even the worst of human beings can agree on, in most cases, there's exceptions to every rule, is that bad things should not happen to little kids.
Yeah, 100%.
So when something bad happens to a little kid, I think it makes everybody upset. And I think it inspires in everybody a desire to find an answer. And a d- and I think it produces, especially in media, a sense of we just need to keep talking about this, not because it's
Mhm.
doing anything of any value, but just because this is a little kid. And if we
Right,
don't, what's going to happen to her?
right.
Right. And when you get into adults, that mindset totally changes, right? Because adults are able to make their own decisions, do their own things. And sometimes the decisions that an adult makes can put them in a situation where something bad happens. It's just the nature of it.
Right.
I don't think that's the case in Amy's case, but I think people can sometimes just default to that.
Mhm.
And then for that reason, it's just kind of like in one ear and out the other.
Kind of like a, almost like a victim blame kind of situation.
To a point. To a point. I would bet there are people that say, "Oh, wow, she's 23 years old. She was out dancing and, getting drunk and she probably did something stupid and got in trouble." I'm sure that exists out in the ether somewhere.
Right.
And I think it's easier to do that with an adult
Other,
because I
yeah.
think there's also a component of people view adults as largely being able to take care of themselves. Whereas you don't think about that with a 6-year-old girl.
Do you think if Amy would have went missing on land, whether it was on the island or here on American soil, do you think the public talk about it would have been different than it was?
I think probably yes. I think the thing that hurts Amy's case, even though I feel like I did a pretty thorough job of dismantling this argument, there's the thought of she could have just fallen over. And if she's in that big vast ocean, what are we going to do?
Right. Ugh.
You know? And I think people look at it and just like, it's easy to just say, oh, that's what happened. So, I mean, what's the point?
Right.
Now, I feel like I did a pretty good job of shredding that theory to bits,
Yeah, I
but
think so as well.
I think that still exists.
Yeah,
And I think if it had happened on land, whether here or there, I do think there would have been a lot more activity around it.
I would say I have
Absolutely.
to agree. I think a lot of people from the very beginning kind of did that. Oh, she accidentally fell overboard,
Mhm.
or she jumped off, and then I'd also seen a few where she ran off to start a new life. That she
Yeah.
left the boat herself and just ran off to start a new life without
I
anyone.
think I torched both of those pretty thoroughly.
Yeah. Yep. I think being on the ship kind of led to those 3 things, and there's in my opinion, there's not even anything to support any of those.
No, I think it's just people making their gut instinct saying, "Oh, well, it seems pretty logical."
It's the only
The
thing
the
that makes
thing that
sense.
drives him yeah, the thing that drives me nuts is when people state it as definitive.
Yeah.
"Ah, she fell off the ship." Like, how could you be so stupid as to think that's not what happened? What?
What makes you think that
You had the
did?
harbor chief saying, based on the location of that boat, if she had fallen off, we'd have found her.
Right.
And this
There
is a
would have
guy
been
who's done those
something.
this is a guy who's been doing those searches for years.
Yep.
But we're just gonna disregard that. Okay.
Don't you love how that works?
Oh, yeah, love it.
I think a lot of it is that unknown. It's the human brain trying to put an answer where there isn't an answer.
Mhm.
And then some of it I mean, let's be
Well,
honest, some of it is
it's
something totally
Occam's razor too, because it that is the simplest explanation.
right.
But people think that Occam's razor is just always the answer. Well, it's not. I could give you a list of solved cases that you would have said, "Here's Occam's razor," and the reality was nowhere near Occam's razor. There's a kid, I think it was in Colorado. This is like 10 years ago. He disappears like 10 years before. Okay, oh, he ran off or he got kidnapped and he got murdered. They found him in a chimney. Is that Occam's razor? No.
Definitely not. Nobody thinks to check the chimney.
No. I mean, there's plenty of cases like that where Occam's razor just doesn't fit.
Yeah,
And I
sometimes
firmly believe Amy's is one of them.
yeah. Yeah, the simplest answer in this one is not the right answer. I feel
Nope.
like you shown that in your series. When mine comes out, I break down the math and the distance and how it's not possible without something being found. So I think between the two of us, people, I hope anyway that that'll kind of start to get cleared up a little bit. So bringing it back to Amy herself, what do you think that you learned about her as a person that people don't hear enough about?
Oh, to me, I think that's an easy one. She was tough. And I don't mean tough in like I'll beat you up sort of tough.
Right.
I mean just tough in she was a fighter. Okay, I got that from everybody that I talked to that knew her really well. And it's one of the biggest reasons that I'm hopeful that she's still alive because I think that fighter's mentality is ingrained in her, and I don't think she's going to quit fighting.
No, I don't think
And
so.
I think that's the thing I walked away from. So, I've always been hopeful that she was still alive, and I still am. I can't state it definitively, and I won't. But the thing that makes me more hopeful is hearing about that part of her and who she is. Get, bolsters my hope that she's still alive.
She's not gonna give up easily.
Yep, she's not gonna go down. She's not gonna go down without a fight.
No, no. That's the same thing that I got about her. She's, um, a very caring person, loves people, but she kinda seems like one of those where much like myself, I love people, I will help you, and I will do everything I can for you, but I also don't take anybody's shit. That's kinda how she seemed to me
Yes.
from what I've come to,
I think that's a really
speaking to
good
everyone.
I think that would be very similar to what my takeaway was about her, which is why I do feel like my hopefulness that she's still out there is stronger now knowing that.
Yeah, I fully believe that as well. So, what questions after now finishing your series,
Mhm.
up to this point anyway, we'll see what the future brings.
Sure.
What questions still feel open to you that you either didn't get an answer to or don't feel like it was answered enough?
So, and I'll preface this by saying I don't know that we'll ever get this answer, but I do think that if we could get this answer, I think we could really hone in on exactly what happened. And to me, it's the question of why did she leave the cabin? If we can understand why she left that cabin, we would probably be able to connect the dots and understand what happened when. And the reason that I say that is I believe that her reasoning was probably something along the lines of I've been up all night, been sitting out on the balcony, haven't slept, probably not going to sleep. So I need to do something and I don't want to wake them up inside. So I'm going to sneak out and was probably just going to burn time and do something totally innocuous and
Maybe go
something
take
bad.
some because she did take her camera, maybe took pictures,
And
things like
something,
that.
yep, and something bad happened to her in the process.
So
Now,
I have oh, go ahead.
I was going to say too, and if we could find out that there was an actual motivation, there was a purpose for why she went out, I think that would also really help us understand what happened, when, and how.
Right. So I think I've 2. I first think, Amy left because there were reports, from previous shipgoers that Yellow was trying to get them to meet him in the Viking Lounge around 6 o'clock. Personally, I think Amy left the cab or the cabin to go meet Yellow for whatever reason, have a couple more drinks after hours or go back up and dance and hang out because like you said they'd been up all night, she wasn't feeling well because of the seasickness. I think it was something along those lines. And mine is the one thing that I feel would tell us so much is what was behind the bar that Yellow had to take Amy back there. What was it that he was going to show her? What convinced her to go there?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And I think there's another thing, and I think I raised it in the episode yesterday. Honestly, it's all a blur. It was either episode 11 or the one yesterday. What happened from the point that Lori and Crystal saw them enter the elevator to the point minutes later when they saw him by himself?
Yeah. I think
Something happened.
yeah. There's so many questions. In the end, I think there's more questions than there is answers, honestly, even after going through it. But uh sitting with you now and discussing these questions, I just have more and more. There's so many that it's like if we could find the answer to this one thing, it would put so many puzzle pieces into place.
It would. I agree with you.
And unfortunately,
And they're
I
not
don't
and
know
they're
if
they're not the big earth shattering questions.
no.
That's the thing that's wild about it. It's some of the most simple questions that if we could just have an answer to, it would probably inform a lot of the reality of what happened.
Yeah. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't realize, that in cases like this, in any case really, not just missing person cases, but in any true crime case, it's those little tiny pieces that end up bringing the whole picture together. Everybody looks for those giant answers. Sometimes you just need one tiny little thing,
It's
and
a
that cracks
puzzle.
it wide open.
Yeah, it's a 5,000 piece puzzle. And you get the pieces together and you start putting them together and oh, it starts to take shape. You're not gonna, it's not a three-piece puzzle. You just
No.
put them together and hey, there it is.
Right.
It's little pieces here, 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 and here. And then all of a sudden you start to see it. Oh, there's that landscape I saw in the box. And it starts to
Yep.
get more and more like it. And all of a sudden, there it is in front of you. And that's how really all of these cases are.
Right. It takes just a little bit of time, and unfortunately, there are some that you're able to throw it together really quick, and then there's some that take much longer.
Yeah,
And a lot of times it's
sadly.
like you said earlier, sometimes a lot of times it's people protecting each other. And it just takes one person to talk, and everybody else is just going to follow suit. It's typically how that happens. Because the first person to talk is usually the first person that gets the deal.
Yes. Yep.
So it's
That I mean,
finding
that's pretty much
that weak
always the
link.
case.
Right.
Yeah.
It's finding the weak link in the entire thing. So now that the case is complete, we talked about it a little bit earlier, but where where are you going creatively from here? What is
Good
next for the
good
show?
question. So, as I've mentioned, this is a pretty exhaustive stretch of shows and periods. So I need to take a little bit of a break. I do have a bigger series planned for the fall, but through the summer, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to be doing kind of a summer international case series. And the reason I'm doing that, and we talked a little bit before we hit the record
Mhm.
button about analytics on our
Yep.
podcast hosts. And my audience is very strong, obviously, in North America, but also in Northern Europe, Australia, New Zealand. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a string of cases starting in the US, but going to all of those different areas. Cases that are very well known in their home countries, but are lesser known here in the States, but just as important and people need to hear. The first case that I'll be doing is case of Gina Bose, which was in Lincoln, Nebraska in 2000. And that case is it's one of those that's just like, whoa, what could have happened? She does a show. She was a musician, does a show at a bar and leaves late that night, goes to pack her stuff up, puts her guitar in her trunk. Trunk never closes. Nobody hears from her. Family goes, sees the car there, sees the trunk slightly ajar, her guitar sitting inside. Never seen or heard from again.
That's wild.
It is. It is. And, we were talking about kind of how we look at cases of kids and then adults. She's 43 when she disappears. So you can imagine how little attention she received,
Right.
right? Now, her sister, I'm hoping to talk to her. She's a very big advocate for missing persons, started an organization called 411 Gina and does a lot to bring awareness to missing person cases. I'm hoping to talk to her. I'm actually going to reach out to Lincoln Police Department because it is still an active case there, and hopefully have them share some insights. But then a couple cases in Canada. Then I'm going to go to the UK. And one of the things that I generally don't do is solve cases, but I am doing a couple this summer, and more for kind of sharing with the audience how some of the investigative side has changed over time.
Mhm.
I talked a little bit about it with um, Greg Nivola this past Wednesday on Witness Wednesday. Um, Things like Othram Labs, DNA Doe Project, their work and their technology and their advocacy is closing out cases that have been cold as can be for 20, 30, 40, 50 years.
Oh, yeah.
So a couple of the cases I'm going to cover this summer are going to be, are going to look at some of those longer term unsolved cases and how they got solved through new technology. And then I'll wrap up and finish in Australia, New Zealand. That'll take me to the fall. And the next big series I'm working on, I'm already started kind of getting everything together for it. To me, one of the most fascinating people in the criminal world, I guess, is Henry Lee Lucas. Beyond being just a complete and utter pile of shit, which I think we can all universally agree to if you know his story, he's also the biggest liar on the planet. And he's a guy who confessed to upwards of 250 murders. At one point, believed to be the biggest serial killer in the history of the world, only to find out that police departments and sheriff's departments were under so much pressure to close out cases that they were going to him. And it was literally a scenario that, like, if he just get close on one or two things about a case and say, I did it, oh, we can close that one out.
Yep.
So, what's the result of that? You have cases where he's confessed to being murdered, that are being the murderer, getting closed out, families thinking that, oh, we finally know, only to find out years later that these police departments are actually more or less bribing him for his confession. Oh, you
Yeah.
need you need a case of cigarettes? Hey, what do you think about that one up in Edmond, Oklahoma? Oh yeah, I did that. I think it was by water. Oh yeah, it was near a puddle. That has to be it. I mean, that's literally how they were closing these cases out. So I'm going to do kind of an insight into Henry Lee Lucas, his association with Otis Toole, another complete and utter piece of shit. And then I'm going to start to look at some of the cases that he confessed to that were closed, but then had to be reopened, and families had that wound reopened and realized that the real killer in many cases was still out there doing God knows what. So that's going to be the framework of that series.
Will be a good one.
Yeah,
That'll be very
I'm
interesting.
excited to do it because a lot of those cases, I mean, that goes back 40 some years
Yeah.
in many instances. And we talk about the Bradleys and how awful it has to be for 28 years to be dealing with it. Imagine being told one day that your kid is murdered. How horrible is that? About the worst thing you can imagine. Then you find out, oh, okay, at least justice will be served. This guy's confessed to it. We can at least sort of feel like we're moving on, only to find out 4 or 5 years later that the actual killer's still out there. And it was just a big bungled mess by the local police department investigating it, who took the cheap way out, took some lying scumbag's confession, called it good. And now you're back to, oh my God, I don't know what happened to my kid. Like,
Right.
it's
I
very
don't think
hard to
that's something anyone could imagine.
no, no. And it happened hundreds of times. That's the part that's so disturbing about it. I mean, this is I mean, that series could almost be an evergreen series because there are that many cases he confessed to that
That is crazy.
ended up being reopened because it was all bullshit.
Yeah,
But
I
I'm gonna
know.
focus on probably the 10 or 12 that have the most existing evidence and that are still hopefully being actively investigated by
Mhm.
agencies who are willing to talk.
That'll be interesting because I am one of those. I do know his story, but I don't know it in depth like that. So, for me, and I'm sure most of my listeners, if not all, that'll be an interesting one
It'll be
to listen to.
interesting. It'll also be very difficult too,
Right. Right.
because I mean, just put yourself in the shoes of the families. You
Right.
think you've got all I mean, you're already dealing with the fact your kid or your brother or your sister's been murdered. Then, okay, well, at least we know who did it, and then, oh my god,
Years later,
w
here it comes and it's
we
ripped back
now we
open.
don't. We're back to where we were, and we just don't know. I mean, just it's one of the most disgusting parts of legal history in the United States to me. I
Yeah,
think
it
it's
it really is,
egregious.
yeah. I know there are so many cases today that genetic genealogy and all of that are reopening because they put the wrong person in prison or the wrong person on death row. There's so many death row inmates that are now being exonerated or, I'm trying to think of what it's called after they've already, passed away, um, but are being exonerated after death as well because they were innocent and they spent their whole lives or were executed. And now, on top of that, then you have this other family who lost their loved one to violence, and now their wound is reopened. So you've just damaged two families for no reason because you didn't want to do your job correctly.
Yeah.
It's it's awful and it's happening more and more today. Well, not that it's happening, but we're seeing it now
Yep.
that people are actually
We're
doing
we're
their jobs.
realizing how bad the problem was. And to be clear, in Henry Lee Lucas's case, I do think a lot of those agencies were looking for an easy way out. Just to,
Yeah,
hey, mark it up on the board. We got that one cleared. But I mean, in a lot of the other cases, I don't necessarily think it was ill intent. I'm sure there is in some cases kind of that same motive, like we got to close this case out. But a lot of it is a function of the technology that they had.
unfortunately, it's just how the system was at that
Yes.
point.
Yeah. So I don't want it to come off as if painting with this broad brush that, you know, every murder that happened pre 1990 should be called into question. It's not.
Right.
Henry Lucas just happens to be a scenario where he just confessed to anything that came in front of him.
He just wanted his 5
Agencies
seconds of
went along
fame.
with it. Yep. Agencies went along with it. He wanted 5 seconds of fame and a bottle of vodka. They were happy to give it to him. And, not only do you have these dead victims, you now have, the pain of the families being reopened and in a lot of cases never being closed.
And then you have an entire department that looks, I mean, just to be frank about it, they look like nothing but jackasses
Hmm. Yep.
because you had a few detectives that are like, "Okay, I wanna
Yeah.
get my big medal and my big pat on the back."
Yep. And the thing about that story too is like, carton of cigarettes, bottle of vodka, donuts. They just give it to him, be like, all right, now what do you think? Oh yeah, I think I did that one. And it wasn't I think there was one case that really started to, like people had to wait, hold on a second, where he confessed to a case in California, claimed to have committed a murder in Jacksonville, Florida, the complete opposite side of the country, the day after, and claimed he drove. And somebody finally looked at it and said, wait a minute, that's a 36-hour drive.
You
He
couldn't have
couldn't have
made
done
that in
both
one
of
day.
these. And then people started to look and be like, wait a minute, this happened on the same date, 800 miles apart. And his car was in the shop. Like, that's for that type of, like, he couldn't
Right.
have done this. And it was at that point it all started to unravel.
Then people finally started figuring out what they were doing. That is wild. That'll be an interesting one, for sure. Like you said, it'll definitely be hard to get through, especially for you, because I know that as the writer and the researcher, it's hard to get through those things. And I've had a couple cases myself where I've had to kind of take a minute and maybe move it down the timeline because you kind of got to take a breather from it.
Hmm.
So that one will be very interesting. It'll be hard for us to get through as listeners, but I know that'll be difficult on you as well, just to
Yeah.
to get it out.
But I
Um,
think I think it's a really important story to tell.
yes, it is. It kind of shows where how things have kind of changed, but also Because unfortunately, there are some officers and detectives that are still like that today.
Mhm.
And it'll kind of show those signs of it and how it's always been the system's always been broken. It's not new.
Yeah, and it'll
It's
always be broken. That's the other part of
yeah,
it. Because guess what? It's run by human beings.
right.
And I don't know if you've heard, we're not perfect.
Nope. We all make mistakes. Sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's not.
Yeah.
And it just kind of is what it is. You can't fix something that is never meant to be perfect.
Nope, you're absolutely right.
So, now before we finish up here, one more thing. You've not only been living in the real unsolved story of Amy Lynn Bradley's disappearance, but you've also stepped completely differently into the world of fiction.
Yes.
So, can you give us a little bit? So, tell us what drew you to the story of Echo 1953
Yes.
and share all the things that you can with us at this point because I know
I
it is not out yet.
yes, I will. So, this is a little bit more fun to talk about than missing people and
Right. End
so
on a fun note.
yeah, so I'm a true crime savant. I mean, for lack of a better term, I've just always followed it. I've always had an interest in it. And I was born and raised in Michigan. I lived in Eau Claire, Wisconsin for 10 years, and now I'm in North Carolina. And as I've moved around those different areas, I always start digging like, oh, are there any interesting cases? And when I was in Eau Claire, um, there were plenty of interesting cases in Wisconsin, but one that really stuck out to me, and it was from 1953, and it was the disappearance of a girl named Evelyn Hartley. And that was in La Crosse, Wisconsin. So it's a Friday night in the fall, big football game in town, and everybody's going to the football game. And the Rasmussen family in La Crosse has a regular babysitter, and Evelyn happens to be her backup. Well, the regular babysitter is going to the football game. So they call Evelyn and say, Evelyn, can you come and you babysit for us? So she heads to the Rasmussen's house. She's there doing babysitting. And at some point during the evening, at least two men break in to the basement of the home and kidnap her. And she's never heard or seen from again. Case is unsolved to this day. And that case always stuck with me. So, um, I've reached this point in my life where my oldest is 21, my youngest is 18. The parenting demands are not very high anymore. And so I've got my evenings more or less because my wife and I, our schedules are a little bit different. So she's up early and to bed earlier. And I've got like 3, 4 hours in the evening where I'm like, okay, I can just sit and watch TV, which I don't want to do. It's totally unproductive. Or I could do something I want to do that I've never been able to do. I want to write a book. So I use that case as my kind of framework. And I built a story off of that. And it's very similar circumstances. Case happens in 1953, almost identical circumstances. In fact, very deep into the writing of the book, I was actually going to use her case in full. And then I'm like, that's probably not the right thing to do. So I reframe the character, reframe the location, but the basic details of her kidnapping remain the same. So then in the story, there's a kidnapping in 2023 done exactly in the same manner where I was from in Michigan. And case goes cold. Sister, a couple years later, decides, I got to get this story out there. I need people to know about my sister, what happened to her. And she goes to a new investigative agency, the retired head of the Detroit FBI office, and his wife, who was an investigative journalist, and they had met working a case at the same time, says, hey, I need help finding my sister. And they quickly find a connection between the two cases 70 years apart. And it's following them as they start to piece together all of the details that connect those two cases. And I had a lot of fun writing it, and there'll be 3 books in this series. So I'm telling you right now, there is a cliffhanger at the end of the first book. Just letting you
Gosh.
know.
I'm slowly working my way through it, but I haven't gotten to that yet.
So there
Oh
is a
man.
cliffhanger in this book, and I'm really excited about 3 weeks ago, I started sending out advanced reader copies. And it's for people to give me feedback because I've rewritten it. I sent it to the copy editor. They cleaned up a lot of the grammar and the punctuation, all that stuff. So it's pretty much ready for prime time. But I want people to read it in advance, pick out any other issues that there might still be that are lingering, but also to get a little bit of interest around the book. So I sent those out like 3 weeks ago. So I'm starting to now, in the last few days, get people contacting me and said, okay, I've read the book. So the thing that you're always wondering is, okay, what are they going to say? Right. And the, the responses I've gotten so far have been phenomenal, and I've just been stunned because there's a part of you just you what you put into it, you know how important it was to you, but you don't know if that comes through in the writing. But the first few emails that I got back of people who read it are like, "This is really good, and I can't wait." When are you starting the second book? And I'm like, "Oh, I'm already like 6 chapters into the first draft," and so they're really excited about that. And I just think that you will see a similarity between the podcast and the book. And what I mean by that is you will see the pain and the hurt of a family that has unanswered questions. But in addition to that, you'll really see it through more of a procedural lens. Like how do these cases get solved? What are the things that investigators are doing to try to solve these cases? But of course, it's a work of fiction too, so it's not real. But I think that what people will really like about it is the characters. That's a really hard thing to write sometimes because you have this idea in your head for each individual character in the book. And it's kind of that, how do I translate what's in my head onto the page? And what I've gotten back from each of the early readers that have responded to me specifically is they love the dynamic between the main characters. And that was intentional. I don't mean to say that my wife and I are the perfect couple, but I modeled their marriage and a working relationship after me and my wife. And to hear people say how much they really liked to see how they work together, not just as, investigators as a team, but as a husband and wife, really meant a lot to me because I put a lot of thought into that, and I really wanted people to get a glimpse of me and my I wanted it to reflect me and my wife. Not that I needed anybody to know it was us, but when I hear people say that, I'm just like, "Yes, I think I conveyed it the way I wanted it to." It translated from head to fingers.
Because sometimes that's honestly the hardest part is you have the idea, you know what you want to say, but then when you put it out, sometimes it's like, nope, scratch that. That's not right.
Yeah, and I mean, I started writing it in September. I had the idea for a while. I started writing it September. I finished the first draft in probably like mid January, and I went through a pretty extensive rewrite. I went back and reread it, and I'm like, oof, there's work that's got to be done on this thing. And I spent another couple of months doing that, and then I sent it off to a copy editor. And that is honestly the most stressful part about writing is they're trained to pick out things. And I knew what I put into writing it, and I knew what I put into editing it in preparation to send it to her. And my fear, frankly, was that it was going to come back and I was going to have to rewrite the whole thing again.
Oh,
And she sent it back to me. And I mean, she said, it's really just some punctuation. She's like, there's like 3 suggestions on the story that I think it could help you tighten it. But she's like, other than that, she's like, this manuscript is very good. And it took me about a week to make those fixes. And I said, all right, now I'm ready to print this thing. And that's when I set everything up. So it'll be available on Amazon. It's available for pre order now. You can find the link right through my podcast website, midnightmysteryarchive.com. If you listen to any of my podcasts, it's in the show notes as well. And that launches July 27th, 2026. I'm already starting to run some ads for it to kind of prime the pump a little bit. So if you're on Facebook and maybe you fall within their true crime category, you may see an ad for it. But yes, it's coming very soon. I'm really excited about it. I'm already working on the second book. There's a 3 book arc with these characters. I've got a second 3 book arc kind of very loosely plotted out, which will be another case that I covered on the podcast because I covered Evelyn's case on the podcast. So it'll be another one. And this is more of a Michigan based, that'll be more of a Michigan based one. To me, these characters have an evergreen quality to them where I can continue to write in that universe for a long.
Hmm. Well, I think all of those will be good. Like I said, because I have my advanced copy, I'm slowly making my way through it with all the other million things I have.
Okay,
Um,
without giving anything away. Okay, have you read the first chapter?
yes,
Okay, did that hook you?
yes, loved the
Okay,
first chapter.
so let me tell you something. That first chapter in my original outline did not exist.
It's so good. I love the first
That was
chapter.
yes, so that was one of the things that I went back and changed. So I had an idea where I was gonna do a prologue and an epilogue, and then I thought about myself as a reader, I'm like, "I don't even read those things." I'm like, "I really need a real first chapter," and I decided to bookend it, no pun intended, with that first chapter, which is really powerful and really, like, grabs you by the sleeves and pulls you
Yeah.
in. And I can tell you too, when you get to the end is going to leave you like, "Holy shit." So I had to ask about the first chapter because I really that actually wasn't didn't exist in my original plans, and I made that change very late in the process, and actually, I gave it to my wife. My wife reads a lot of fiction, a lot of crime fiction, and she's like she's a ADD. So she's just like, if a book doesn't trip my trigger in first couple chapters, I'm out.
Yeah, that's how I am.
And the
No
first thing
thanks.
she did is she texted me, she's like, "Well, I'm hooked." And I'm like, "Yes."
But it's always different to hear it from someone who doesn't have that bias.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Which is why the ARC readers are so important, and now that I'm starting to get some feedback from them, I'm like, "Okay." She wasn't just blowing smoke up my butt.
Right, right. Yeah, I thought the first chapter was really good. I'm slowly making my way through it. I was hoping I was gonna have it finished before we sat down and talked today, but that didn't happen.
No, that's alright, that's alright. As long as you enjoyed the first chapter and it hooked you,
Yep,
that's
I
the
loved
biggest
it
thing.
so far. It's really good. When I'm done with it, I'm gonna let my grandma read it.
Great.
Yep, because she's into all of the fiction, true crime novels, all of that too. So I'm sure she's gonna love it. And same with my husband's grandma. I think she's gonna love it because she's into all
Good.
those too. So
Yes, good.
plenty of people that'll definitely be interested on this end anyway in the book.
Well, good, and I'm glad, and I really appreciate you doing that. I know it's a time commitment, but, your willingness to do that is extremely helpful to me.
And I love to read. So if
Good.
it hooks me, then it hooks me. I'm not gonna lie, I have books on my shelves that I've been trying to read for years
Yeah, me
that
too.
I'm like, I'm gonna read it one day.
Yep, I'm
I
the same
just
way.
I gotta get into it. Pride and Prejudice is one of them. I wanna read it so bad. I love Jane Austen and I wanna read it. I get about 3 chapters in and I'm like, I can't. This is so boring. I can't do
Well,
it.
it's just and I think that's a thing that I've noticed too is that, a lot of the classics, they're classics for a reason.
Yeah.
they're obviously extremely well written, but, you know, you view them through a modern lens, and they're very dry,
Yeah.
through, from a modern point of view. It's and it's sad actually, because they are such great works. But I'm the same way. I've gone back and tried to reread some of those classics, and I'm just like I don't have time.
Right? It's just so because it's good. When it gets really good. It just takes a long time to get there.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's one of the things that you'll find with my book and how I'm going to structure my series is that these are not going to be 500, 600-page novels. Most people don't have the time for that. They're going to fall somewhere in the 280, 350 pages, stuff that, you know what, if you're really adventurous, you could read on an afternoon.
Right.
So and because the modern reader is different than they were 50 years ago.
People are
It's just
just too busy
yeah.
nowadays.
Yep. They still want that, but they need it in a manner that fits their,
Right.
the limited time they have available.
Right. Right. Because I love to read. I used to be able to read several books in a week, but now I can't. I'm just way
I
too
know.
busy to be able to sit down and do it. And many people in today's world are like that.
Yep,
So
and
having
I'm
those
I'm one of
smaller
them.
books are
Yep.
broken up into a series rather than this giant book, I think that fits a lot of people in today's world.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of the way I've approached it. And I'm, well into book 2 now, drafting that. And, my expectation is I'll probably, if I follow the same basic timeline, I should have that probably ready to publish by the end of the year.
So that'll be exciting. Maybe I'll just stretch it out so that way I can go right into book 2 by the time I'm done with this one, so I don't have the cliffhanger.
Yeah, I mean, it's really fun. And, I've always said too, I'm not a creative person. Like my wife is an artist and she's so good at it. And I always thought I don't have a creative bone in my body. I can't play music. I can't play instruments. I can't draw. I mean, I can barely write my name.
That's how I
And,
feel.
so it's like I don't have an artistic, but I'm like, I feel like I could write, and that's an art.
Mhm.
And, I really I got to that point 7, 8 months ago. I'm just like, I got these evenings free and I can either choose to be lazy with them or actually try to do something productive. And I started writing and I'm glad I did. It's kind of how the podcast came about, to be honest with you, too.
You found your niche.
Yeah, I was like, you know what? I got some free time now. The kids aren't constantly needing me or my wife to do stuff. I need to find a hobby. As I started
Right.
doing a podcast. And then I'm like, I got more time. Start writing books.
And look at you now.
I know. People may actually know my name one day.
Yep. Right. Okay, Kevin, I think I might have kept you long enough. We're
Yeah, that's okay.
It's
I
been a
enjoyed
while.
it.
Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. I love the way that you approached Amy's case, how much you dug into it. I know you put a lot of time into it. I loved it. I'm sure our listeners, once they jump on and they catch up, they're gonna love it. So, for our listeners who want to follow Kevin's work, go check out Midnight Mystery Archive and keep an eye out for Echo 1953. You
Yep.
said it is available for pre-order.
Pre-order. Yep, on Amazon. Yep,
Okay.
just punch it into the search bar on Amazon and it'll pop right up. And then if you're, if you listen to the podcast, it's always links always in the show notes, or you can access it right through my homepage of my website, midnightmysteryarchive.com.
I am going to link your website in the episode description of this episode so that way you guys can easily find it. That way you can find the book and figure out wherever the podcast is that you listen to so you can go check it out. I know he's got a pretty good sized backlog plus all of Amy's that are right up top. Uh, and Kevin, I'd love to have you back anytime, whether we're covering a case or we're just going back
Sure,
and forth.
I'd be happy to.
It was very fun talking to you. So glad you were on. I know this is a long episode, guys, but I feel like I think it's worth it. You get a
I
little bit
think
of
so too. I don't think either of us are dry. So
no,
this was not a Jane Austen work here.
no, it wasn't. Guys, so my coverage of Amy's case will be coming soon. As Kevin can attest to, it's a very large case. A lot of work has to go into it, a lot of moving parts, a lot of people. So before mine comes out, I want to make sure that it is correct. It sounds the way it should. That's coming soon. Go and get a sneak peek of what you will be getting from me by listening to Kevin. He covers a lot of things. There's some things there I don't cover. So give him a listen. Thank you again, Kevin. Appreciate you coming on
Thank you for
and
having me, Carrie.
not a problem at all. Hopefully we will be talking again soon.
I'm sure we will.
And that's it, guys. And y'all, that's it for this bonus. I hope you enjoyed this deeper look into both shows and into Amy Bradley's case. I'll be back on Monday with Mama to finish up our coverage of Ted Kaczynski. Until then, remember to watch for monsters, don't kill people, and I'll catch y'all on Monday. Bye, y'all.